Chapter 2. A Store Contest. As the clownfish flopped in the street in front of the car, the Hollister boys cried out. The driver saw the bass and the bucket and swerved just in time. Pete ran out to grab the fish, but it kept slipping out of his hands. Ricky picked up the bucket. Now he went to help his brother. "Oh, you'll never catch him," called Joey, and ran off. Pete and Ricky paid no attention to him. They were too busy with the fish. Every time they touched it, the bass would give a tremendous leap. "He'll wear himself out and die before we can get him into the aquarium," Pete groaned. As he and Ricky were struggling to get hold of the fish, a boy who had been standing nearby put down a basket and a loaf of bread and hurried over to help. He was the same lad the mean man had scolded out on the bank of the river. The boy moved quickly and seized the bass by the gills. With the three boys holding on to it, the fish finally stopped struggling and was carried into the store. "Hi, Tinker," Pete called to a tall man who was waiting on a customer. "Help us get this fish into the tank quick, will you?" Tinker, a kind man whom Mr. Hollister had hired to help him at the trading post, excused himself from the customer and opened a little door at the back of the store window. The three boys stepped inside and put the fish into the aquarium. "Is it dead?" Ricky asked, as the bass lay on its side and did not swim. "I don't think so," Pete replied, prodding it a bit. "Look, its tail is moving." As the three boys looked on, the fish began to move slowly. First it righted itself, then with a few more wiggles began to swim about normally. "Whew," said the boy who'd helped them. "I never thought it would pull through." "We wouldn't have made it if you hadn't run over to help us," said Pete gratefully. "Thanks a lot." "What's your name?" Ricky asked him. "Bobby Reed," the boy smiled. "I've heard about you fellows. You're the Hollister boys, aren't you? The Happy Hollisters?" "Yes, I'm Pete, and this is Ricky." "I think Joey Brill spilled the pail on purpose," Bobby said. "I know," Pete replied. "We've had trouble with him before." When the Hollisters first came to Shoreham, Joey had tried to scare them by saying their house was haunted. "Well, when Joey sees the fish alive in the aquarium, he'll know his trick didn't work," Ricky said. The boys stepped down through the little door from the show window into the store. They almost bumped into Pam Hollister, who was carrying a big piece of cardboard, a pencil, and a paintbrush. "What's that for?" Ricky asked. "You watch." Pam leaned on a counter and began to sketch letters onto the cardboard with a pencil. She looked up. "Oh, it's going to be a sign announcing the big fish contest," Pete said, and told Bobby about it. They watched Pam as she sketched out the big block letters. Then she painted the sign, being careful to keep the letters even. "That's swell," Pete exclaimed, admiring the finished sign. It read, "Big Fish Contest. $25 worth of merchandise for the person catching the largest bass in Muskong River. Contest will continue for 2 weeks. Bring them back alive." In a few minutes, the sign had dried, and Pete put it in the store window next to the aquarium. Immediately, a crowd began to gather outside. The Hollister children went out to listen to their comments. "Well, well," said a fat man. "I can catch a fish bigger than that one." "Me too," boasted another. A tall boy said, "What am I waiting for? I'm going to get my fishing pole and catch one right away." As the others laughed, he hurried off. When Pete looked around, he suddenly realized that Bobby was not in sight. "Where did Bobby go?" he asked Ricky. "I don't know, but look. There's his loaf of bread that he laid on the sidewalk. I guess he only took his basket." Pete picked up the bread, which was in a waxed paper, marked Miller's Bakery. "He must have been on an errand when he stopped to help us," Pete said. When he told Pam about it, she suggested that he take the bread to his house. "But I don't know where he lives," Pete said. Pam glanced down the street. "Here comes Dave Mead," she said. "Perhaps he knows." Dave was a tall, good-looking boy of Pete's age, whom the children had met at a party soon after they moved into town. His straight black hair always hung down over his forehead, no matter how often he combed it. When Pete asked him if he knew Bobby Reed, he said yes, he did. Bobby and his mother, who were poor, lived in a house down by the Muskong River. It was not far from the stone bridge. "You can't miss it," Dave said, "because it has a red brick chimney that's falling apart." Pete and Pam decided to walk there and return the bread. Ricky said he wanted to go home and play ball with some friends. Dave agreed to accompany him on Pete's bike and take the pail back. "See you later," Pete said, as he and Pam set off to find Bobby Reed's house. It was not long before the two children came to the path which led toward the river. Soon they were in sight of the stone bridge. "Oh, look," Pam said, pointing toward the river. "I think that's our dog." Among the bushes at the water's edge, the children saw a dog's tail wagging back and forth. "It's Zip, all right," Pete said. "He's chasing frogs again." Zip was the Hollisters' faithful collie. He often accompanied the children on their adventures, and on more than one occasion had saved them from trouble. Pete thrust 2 fingers into his mouth and gave a sharp whistle. The tail stopped wagging, and the dog looked around. When he saw the children, he bounded up to meet them. "Hi," Pete said, stroking Zip's head. "How's the frog hunting today?" The dog licked Pete's hands and started back toward the river, barking. "I know what he wants," Pam said. "He'd like to chase a stick in the river." She and Pete ran along behind the dog until they came to the riverbank. Pete picked up a short stick and threw it far out into the stream. Zip dashed into the water after it. Swimming with strong strokes, the dog reached the stick, snapped it into his mouth, and started back toward shore. When he was nearly there, he stopped to look at something half submerged in the water. The children saw that it was an old rowboat. On the prow of the boat, next to an iron anchor ring, sat a turtle, sunning itself. With a turn of his head and a quick look at the children, Zip let go of the stick and swam toward the old boat. "He's going to try to catch the turtle," Pam said, laughing. But Zip was too noisy. The turtle slipped over the side of the boat and disappeared into the water. Zip splashed around for a minute, then retrieved the stick and brought it to the feet of the children. "Good boy," Pam said. "Goodness, don't shake that water off on me." After Pam threw the stick into the river again and Zip dashed off to get it, Pete looked at the old rowboat. "I wonder who owns it," he said. "It looks as if it's been abandoned," his sister replied. "If it doesn't belong to anybody," Pete went on, "Ricky and I might fix it up. I think I'll look it over." He laid the bread on the bank, then removed his shoes and socks and rolled up his dungarees. Wading into the water, he grabbed the anchor ring to which a rusty chain was attached. As he pulled up the anchor, which was covered with weeds, Pete said, "This boat hasn't been used in a long time. No wonder it's waterlogged." He pulled the boat up to the shore to get a better look at it. All the floorboards seemed to be in place. "Let's turn it over to get the water out," Pam suggested. "I'll help you." Zip barked a couple of times as if to say he wanted them to play with him instead. But he wagged his tail and watched as Pete and Pam tilted the boat on its side. The water poured out with a rush. "Okay, let it fall back. 1, 2, 3. The bottom of the boat slapped the water and it was afloat. "Hey, not bad," Pete exclaimed. "It leaks, but the holes could be plugged up. I'm going to paddle around in it." Seeing a long, thin piece of wood on the shore, he picked it up for a paddle. "Jump in, Pam, I'll take you for a ride," he offered. When Zip whimpered, he added, "You too, pal, hop aboard." Zip bounded into the front of the boat, and Pam sat on the center seat. Pete pushed the boat out a little way, scrambled into the stern, and started to paddle. "This is leaking pretty badly," Pam said, taking off her shoes. "We'd better not go far." "You're right, it'll take a lot of bailing to keep this old tub afloat." Pete paddled in a big circle and headed back to shore. "Hurry," Pam said as the water began to come in faster. Pete paddled with all his might, and soon the bow scraped on the shore. By that time it was half filled with water. "Crickets," Pete exclaimed as they got out. "This crate needs a lot of fixing." He pushed the boat out a way and threw the anchor into the water. The children put on their shoes and started off again. They had just passed under the stone bridge when Pam said, "I see a red chimney, Pete, over there." Up ahead, they could glimpse an old shack nestled among trees on high ground. Reaching it, they noticed neat flowered curtains at the windows, but otherwise the house looked dilapidated. Its roof sagged, and the yellow paint was flaking off. The children were about to walk up to the door when they heard shouts from the rear. "I don't have any," somebody shouted angrily. Another voice said loudly, "Yes, you do. Give me some of them or I'll hit you." This was followed by a rustling in the bushes, and Bobby Reed rushed out. His face was red and he was out of breath. In one hand, he clutched his basket. "Bobby," Pete called out, "we're looking for you. But the panting boy was too terrified to pay any attention. Racing toward the house, he glanced back over his shoulder. In doing this, the boy did not see a stick lying in his path. He stepped on it and slipped to one knee. The basket nearly flew out of his hand. "Oh!" cried Pam, fearing that Bobby had hurt himself. The boy scrambled to his feet again and scooted toward the house. But as he raced forward, a stone shot out from the bushes. It flew directly toward Pam's head,